Hi, my name is Rachel Anderson. Welcome back to part 2 of How to Teach Your Children with Learning Challenges using RightStart Math webinar. If you did not have the opportunity to watch part 1, I'm going to recommend that you go ahead and do so. It's already out there on the website. You just need to click on resources and then click on pre-recorded webinars and then do a search for, scroll down so you see how to teach children with learning challenges. At the end of this webinar, I'm going to open up the time for questions. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask that you wait until the end and to ask your questions. There's a chat box on your screen that you can click on and type in your question. If you saw the first webinar, you're going to recall that I am passionate about helping kids with children who have learning struggles, because I have 2 of them in my family. One of my kids has dyslexia, ADHD, memory deficiency so bad that he could not read until 3rd grade. My other child has dyslexia and ADHD, probably more dyscalculia portion of it, but it presents itself differently. For her, we literally spent, no joke about this, we literally spent about 3 months working only on learning the names of her numbers through 20. I am not joking. That was a fun time. But during those years of helping my kids work through their struggles, I learned a lot. And hopefully some of the things I have learned will be able to help you as you work with your kiddos. For math, the best thing I ever did was stumble across RightStart Math. The way RightStart Math approaches math not only helped my strong learners, but also my struggling learners. It helped all of my children to be able to visualize quantities by grouping them and dividing them into 5s and 10s. RightStart Math also teaches visual strategies to be able to solve equations and understand how math works. I covered those 2 topics extensively in the first webinar, so if you're interested in more information, you might want to watch that. Today, we're going to talk about how RightStart Math teaches kids to understand math, to give the big picture of how math works together to solve problems. One of the many hurdles kids face when learning word problems is how to dissect them. In fact, many of you probably don't enjoy word problems yourselves. I know I didn't growing up. Word problems are not always fun. If you have a struggling learner, you may notice that there's a real huge disconnect with how to dissect word problems. They don't seem to be able to understand how you can create an abstract equation from a story. So, RightStart Math uses a tool called part-whole circles. This tool has really helped my kids learn how to break apart word problems and create an equation from them. And this is basically how it works. That top circle is where the whole amount goes, or the total amount. The bottom circles are where you put the parts of things. You can have as many part circles as you need. You're not limited to just 2 that I showed here, but for this particular demonstration, I'm just going to use these 2 parts. So if I have the number 7 as my whole amount or my total amount, and I have 4 as one of the parts, then what would be the remaining part? What do I need to add to 4 to get to 7? 3, right? Good. Now let's see how this works with a word problem. So here's the word problem. Lee received 3 goldfish as a gift. Now Lee has 5 goldfish. How many goldfish did Lee have to start with? So I always start with asking questions. The first part of the problem says Lee received 3 goldfish. So my question is 3 a part of a bigger number, or is it the whole amount? Is that all the goldfish Leah will ever have? Well, 3 is a part, right? So that's going to go in one of the part circles. The next part of the problem says, now Lee has, whoops, I went too far. Now Lee has 5 goldfish. So my question is 5 a part, or is it a whole? Is 5 the total amount of goldfish that Lee has? Well, it is. 5 is the whole. So we're going to put 5 in the whole circle. So what's the missing part? the answers too, right? Now, if your child does not know the solution, make sure they have the tools they need to figure it out. I always suggest having like the AL Abacus available to help them find the answer. I tell this to parents all the time: provide your kids with the tools they need to help them solve the problems. So now let's go ahead and write the equation. Okay, so here we go. Well, now wait a minute. There are 3 equations listed. Well, which one's right? Well, they all are, aren't they? Using this method of teaching, the whole part circles, not only are we helping our kids learn to break down word problems, but they are also learning how all of math works together. They are learning that they can think through word problems in different ways. An example of this is one of my kids, Parker. He solves all of his subtraction equations by using addition. For example, if he saw that 5 minus 3, he's going to say, what do I need to add to 3 to get to 2? That's just how he thinks. Your child has their own strength, their own way of thinking through things. So make sure you're providing the methods and allowances to let your child do what's natural for them. So if your child is a natural addition thinker, even though they're working on subtraction, let them think through the equation as they naturally do. Fractions, here we go, everybody's favorite, right? Well, actually, if you were to ask my 2 struggling learners what their favorite subjects are in math, they are going to say geometry, which makes sense because they are spatially minded and geometry is spatial. But the second concept, math concept that they like, believe it or not, is fractions. The way RightStart Math presents fractions has such a common sense approach that it makes sense to all children, including struggling learners. Let me show you how it works. This is the fraction chart. This is what the RightStart Math uses. Notice this is a linear chart. By the way, if you are interested in more information, I'm just going to touch on fractions here, but we have 3 webinars, pre-recorded webinars out there on our website already. So if you are interested in more information about fractions and how RightStart Math teaches, you might want to check those out as well. Okay, so let's take a look at this fraction chart. By looking at this fraction chart, can you tell me how many fourths there are in a whole? Okay, let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 4 fourths in a whole. How about the 6s? Can you see how many 6s there are? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 6s in a whole. Let your child work through these activities to help them come across the algorithm on their own. Which is more, 3/4 or 4/5? Well, let's take a look. There's 3/4. There's 4/5. Isn't that obvious? 4/5 is bigger, and it's so obvious to the eye. The kids are able to see that immediately. What about something a little more complex? Which is bigger, 7/8 or 8/9? There's 7/8. There's 8/9. Even though it's only slightly bigger, it is still very obvious that the 8/9 is bigger. Again, let your child work through enough activities that they can find the algorithm on their own. How many fourths equal a whole? Or I'm sorry, equal a half. Well, first off, we want to find this half line. Here's a half, right? And there's your half line. We're going to scoot that all the way down to the fourths. How many is that? 2/4 equal a half. That's easy. What about 8s? Here's our half line. We'll drop that down to our 8s. 4/8. What about addition? What is 1/4 plus 1/8? It's addition and it's different denominators. Oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Well, let's look at it first. 1/4 and 1/8. What we're going to do when we're first introducing addition is we're going to scoot that 1/8 over. We're going to slide that 1/4 down. Can you see how much that is? 1/4 plus 1/8 equals 3/8. We're going to do this enough that they're going to be able to see how fractions work all together so that they can see the big picture. RightStart Math also, oops, there we go, also provides games. We do provide some worksheets, but it's not total, practice is not done on the worksheets. We provide the math card games. This way they are able to practice what they're learning. In the last webinar, I believe I talked a little bit about the problem with worksheets and flashcards and why the overuse of them is not beneficial. If you did not see that, you might want to take a glance at it. But why games, really? Why games? Well, games are to math like books are to reading. Games provide interesting repetition, not the flashcard over and over and over and filling in worksheet after worksheet. It also provides an application for the student to use new information that they have just learned. I'm going to show you some of our more popular games, and you can see how these games work and how fun they can be for your kids and engaging. The first game I'm going to talk about is the Go to the Dump game. The Go to the Dump game is basically a Go Fish type of a game, except the pairs are actually numbers that pair together to equal 10. For example, 1 and 9. 1 plus 9 equals 10. 2 and 8, 3 and 7, 4 plus 6, 5 plus 5. Always, always, always provide the tools your child needs when they're playing games. If they do not know an answer, let them look it up. The game time is not a quiz. It's not a test. The games provide the kids with practice. So if they don't know an answer, let them use the tools they need to figure the answer out. And chances are the next time they get to that same equation, they are going to remember them looking it up the previous time. So it just helps them in their process of learning. By the way, we have this game available as an app. You can download it on your Apple or Android device. It's called the Go to 10 that you can search for in your phone's store. Another fun game that we used in my family is Ring Around the Products. The purpose of this game is to review multiplication facts. And the goal of the game is to get as many cards as you can possibly get, which is always my kids' favorite part. We start by setting up the game board. Start by placing 6 of your product cards in the center of the game board, and then surround those 6 cards with basic number cards 1 through 10. We are not going to use the zeros for this particular game. All right, so the first player is actually going to go through the board one full time, and I'll show you how that works. They're going to take a look at that first card, first product card, which is 54. And they're going to ask, what do I need to add, multiply together to equal 54? What are the math facts? This is 54, it's 6 and 9, right? Well, we have 6 and 9 on our game board, so we're able to collect all 3 of those cards and put them in our completed file. Now, our completed piles. Now, one thing I want to say here is when your child is doing the math card games, make sure they are saying the equations out loud. Notice I said 6 times 9 equals 54. It is so beneficial for your child, especially if they're a struggling learner or even an average learner, to not only say the equation, but to hear themselves saying the equation. Also, I use this particular game as an independent game. I have 4 kids in my family, so I have to kind of use my time very, very wisely. So a lot of times I will set the game up right next to me as I'm working with another child, and my kids can actually answer the equations out loud so I can hear them and make sure they're doing it right while I'm teaching another child, which is just a little trick for you if you have some extra kids that you need to teach while your kids or other kids are playing games. All right, so back to this. 6 times 9 equals 54. All right, the next product card is 12. What 2 numbers multiply together to equal 12? Well, 3 and 4 do, right? Well, we have the 3, but we don't have the 4, so there's nothing we can do with that one. Is there another set of multiples that multiply together to equal 12? Well, 6 and 2 do, right? 6 times 2 equals 12. Yeah. So we have those cards, and we can put those in our completed pile. Our next product is 42. What 2 numbers multiply together to equal 42? 7 and 6. We have the 7. We do not have the 6, so we have to move on. 50. What 2 numbers multiply together to equal 50? 5 times 10 equals 50. We have the 5. We do not have the 10. We need to move on. 15. What two numbers multiply together to equal 15? 3 and 5, right? Oh, we have those cards out there, so we're going to collect those. And our last number is 9. 2 multiples together to equal 9 is 3 times 3. We only have 1 3, so we can't play that. And then 9 plus 1 also equals 3, but we don't have the 9. So that player's turn is done, and we're going to go to the next player. In order to, we need to reset the board though, and fill in all of the gaps between with the basic number cards and the product cards, and then it's the next player's turn. We talked earlier today about, in this webinar, about fractions. This game is about fractions. It's talking about concentrating on 1, and it's kind of like the game concentration. The purpose of this game is to help kids understand that 5/5, 8/8, or something like 3/3 also equal a whole. And the goal is to find the pairs that make the whole. We start off by laying the game board out with the fraction cards faced down. Again, always provide the tools the students need to find the answer if they don't know it. In this case, it's going to be the fraction chart and not the AL abacus. So the first player is going to start, and they're going to turn over a card. Here we go. We have 3/5. What do we need to add to 3/5 to get to 1 or to a whole? If you don't know, we look it up. There's 3/5. How many more fifths do we need to equal a whole? We need 2 more fifths. So we're going to look for the 2/5 card in this game board. There's 2/5. We get to collect those cards. That player gets to go again. That player is going to turn over a 3/8 card. How much do I need to add to 3/8 to get to a whole? Now I'm going to pause here again because I want to also make a mention. One of my kids has strong processing struggles, and so step-by-step processes are difficult for him to remember. So what you have heard me do while we're playing these games is give verbal prompts as to how to help my child to think through the next step. So, for example, when he turned over the 3/8 card, my initial thing is to say, what do we need to add to 3/8 to get to a whole? If you don't know, look on the board. So I'm giving him those verbal prompts to help him learn how to think. Eventually, after we've played this game for a while, I'm going to start pulling off on those hints. And he's going to turn that 3/8 card over, and I'm going to say, what do you do next? That way, he starts learning to think on his own. All right, back to the game. 3/8. What do I need to add to 3/8 to get to a whole? Let's look it up on our fraction chart. There's 3/8. I need another 5/8, right? 5/8 to equal a whole. So that player is going to look for the 5/8 card. Well, there's 7/8, not 5/8. So that's not a match. So we're going to turn those cards back over, and it's time for the next player's turn. The next player will turn over the 5/8 card. What do we need to add to 5/8 to get to a whole? There's 5/8. I need a total of 3/8 more. Oh, I think I know where that is, don't you? There's the 3/8, and we're going to pull that in our pile. That is now a pair. You want to be able to supply games, fun games, to help your kids practice their math facts. RightStart Math has a full curriculum that teaches students from elementary through middle school, helping them to understand the math concepts. It provides a hands-on approach which struggling learners really do need to help them understand math concepts. I always like to say it gives concrete to abstract thought. The manipulatives help students visualize quantities. RightStart Math curriculum teaches strategies to help students learn their math facts. It doesn't have the student memorize their math facts by rote, though. Instead, it provides tools to help the student learn and visualize their math facts for easier retrieval later on. Understanding and problem solving is emphasized in the curriculum. At this time,